Ugh, I've been procrastinating this for a while. Procrastinating. What the heck is ruscrinating? Whatever. Uh, yeah, so I want to get more of this, through more of this. So let's do it.
Civil rights are guarantees that the federal government will treat people equally and that decisions will be based on merit rather than race, gender, religion, or other personal characteristics. Sometimes civil rights are called positive rights because they are powers and privileges granted to the people by the Constitution. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, found the Supreme Court a particularly powerful tool for advancing civil rights in the 1950s and in the 1960s. In one of the most famous landmark cases of the Supreme Court, Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, 1 and 2, 1954 and the following year, 1955 respectively, it overturned the 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson case that had upheld segregation by allowing for separate but equal accommodations on sleeping cars. This landmark case helped set the course for civil rights victories in the 1950s and 60s. The liberal Warren Court, named after Chief Justice Earl Warren, handed down many landmark decisions on individual rights in the 1960s. In Engle versus Vitale from 1962, the Supreme Court ruled that the Bible reading in public schools was unconstitutional on the grounds that it was a religious activity that placed an indirect coercive pressure upon religious minorities. This is an example of the protection of minority rights discussed in Module 5.5. The Warren Court first forced states to draw their legislative districts with roughly equal populations inside them in two landmark decisions, Baker versus Carr in 1962 and Reynolds versus Sims in 1964. The two decisions enshrined the one person, one vote rule in American constitutional law. Recently, in April 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously turned back a legal effort to reinterpret the one person, one vote ruling that states may rely on total population when drawing their legislative districts. The 2016 case Evanwall versus Abbott was brought by two Texas voters who argued that counting non-voters, children, the mentally disabled, disenfranchised prisoners, and non-citizens broke that rule and diluted the political power in violation of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Many observers noted that in Evanwall's interpretation, it would redraw the American political map in favor of whiter, older, and more conservative people. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote for the majority rejecting the appellate's case. The Warren Court also handed down some important rulings that protected American civil liberties. Civil liberties can be defined as freedoms guaranteed in the Constitution. Sometimes they are called negative rights because in these areas they curtail the power of government. In the 1965 Supreme Court case Griswold versus Connecticut, the Supreme Court protected Americans' right to privacy by striking down a Connecticut law banning the sale of contraceptives. This right to privacy could be found in the First Amendment, which grants the right of association, also in the Fifth Amendment, which protects against self-incrimination. You've heard the statement, I plead the Fifth because my answer tends to incriminate me, right? And the Ninth Amendment, which states that an individual's rights are not limited to those explicitly stated in the Constitution. Another important Supreme Court case involving the right to privacy is Bowers versus Hardwick. In 1986, the court ruled that a person did not have a right to engage in homosexual acts which were illegal in Texas. But then the Supreme Court overruled its earlier decision in the 2003 case Lawrence versus Texas, stating that consenting adult homosexuals did have a right to privacy. In the recent June 2015 Supreme Court case Obergefell versus Hodges, the Supreme Court overturned state bans and made same-sex marriage legal throughout the United States. The Griswold versus Connecticut case, however, would influence the debate over reproductive rights, and in particular, one of the most controversial Supreme Court cases in history, Roe v. Wade. In 1973, in a 7-2 opinion, the Supreme Court sided with the plaintiff Roe, stating that the right to privacy included the right to abortion. The court, trying to balance the concepts of rights to life and privacy, came up with what was called a trimester framework. In the first trimester, a woman could seek an abortion. In the last 2 trimesters, however, the court argued that the state had an interest in regulating abortions, if they were based on health reasons. The state must have a compelling reason, the ruling stated, for regulating these. Thus, the Roe ruling nullified state laws that made first trimester abortions illegal. And from that point forward, the courts would grapple with a whole host of related issues, like spousal consent, for example. And the cases in the 1970s, such as Doe v. Bolton and Planned Parenthood versus Danforth, were some of these cases. In 2003, President George W. Bush signed the Partial Birth Abortion Act, and the Supreme Court upheld this act in Gonzalez versus Carhart and Gonzalez versus Planned Parenthood Federation of America. The Partial Birth Abortion Act prohibited a certain abortion procedure, which had previously been allowed if a woman's health was at stake. Critics of the Warren Court protested its judicial activism, which means the attempts by a judge to influence public policy through their case decisions. These critics preferred judicial restraint, meaning they wish to see the Supreme Court decide only narrow constitutional issues and not usurp what they believe to be the powers of other branches of government. Sometimes, however, the Supreme Court may restrict civil liberties. Japanese internment is one such example. On March 21, 1942, during World War II, under the auspices of national security, President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, and this authorized the sending of all Americans of Japanese descent to makeshift prison camps, euphemistically called relocation centers, located in remote areas of the West, like the Arizona desert. 2.5 years later, in December 1944, the government declared the emergency over and allowed Japanese residents to return to their homes. In the Supreme Court case Korematsu versus the U.S., the court declared that the evacuation was constitutional. Federal government restrictions on civil liberties often come during a time of war, and national security is often cited as the reasoning. This is true during the War on Terror. In the aftermath of the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, Congress passed the Patriot Act. And the goal of the act was to catch terrorists before they could strike. A 300-page of legislation, it expanded the government's abilities to put Americans under surveillance and to monitor internet and phone communications. The law allowed the federal government to find out what books people checked out from the library and what videos individuals were watching. This was previously allowed, but only with a court order. While some thought it was a sign that Big Brother was here, as mentioned in Module 2.1, others felt that they had nothing to hide. The law was reapproved with minor changes in 2006. I suggest you carefully go over your textbook and continue to read and review this video and answer all of the questions.
Oh my gosh. Oh. All right.
The framers of Philadelphia had decided that protecting citizens from improper government action was unnecessary, but anti-federalists called for guarantees of essential personal liberties. Poor James Madison, the Federalist who had already taken notes at the Philadelphia Convention and penned the Federalist Papers under the pen name Publius with John Jay and Alexander Hamilton, he also had the task of streamlining more than 200 demands from the state ratifying conventions into one document of 12 amendments. It would then be whittled down to 10 amendments to the Constitution called the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was based on some key principles found in the English Bill of Rights, which was signed by King William III and dated to the late 1680s, a whole century earlier. Found in the English Bill of Rights, which was signed by King William III, amendments. It would then be whittled down to 10 amendments to the Constitution called the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was based on some key principles found in the English Bill of Rights, which was signed by King William III and dated to the late 1680s, a whole century earlier. The English Bill of Rights marked the evolution of England from a nation of subjects serving a monarch to a free people with inalienable rights. England is now a constitutional monarchy. The English Bill of Rights called for freedom of speech in Parliament, for example, and the right of Englishmen would be that particular right of Englishmen would be safeguarded in the first of 10 amendments. The Bill of Rights in the Constitution was also based on the Virginia Declaration of Rights, drafted in 1776 by George Mason. Mason was a strong proponent of individual rights. He attended the 1787 convention and criticized the final document for eluding these rights. Mason and other critics agreed to support the Constitution only if the final version included a Bill of Rights. Let's quickly run through the rest of the amendments before talking about them in more depth in the next modules. The First Amendment safeguarded the most fundamental freedoms of expression, religion, speech, press, and political activity, such as the right to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Again, many of these originated in the English Bill of Rights. The second guaranteed the right to keep and bear arms. The third sought to protect citizens from the most awful tyranny, standing armies. The fourth, through the eighth, limited police powers of the states by guaranteeing fair treatment in legal and judicial proceedings. The Fourth Amendment was a right to be secure from an unreasonable search and seizure. The Fifth Amendment, rights in criminal cases, including due process and indictment by grand.
What's that?
I'm bored and I can't go to bed.
Oh, you can't?
What are you doing?
What I'm doing is I'm trying to. Oh, yeah, it's me. It's my webcam. I'm doing a live stream right now, actually, although nobody's watching it. But I'm trying to learn stuff, and to force me to learn, if I record myself learning it, then it forces me to do it. Does that make any sense? Like, I don't know. If I don't, it's making me do it, so.
Huh?
So it doesn't matter. Yeah, I've got a live stream right now of me, so you're there. And I got the closed caption going, and I'm watching a video. So it's me learning on a video, live streaming.
What is
That-
it on?
It's American government. I'm I'm taking some college courses, and what do you call this? Is on American government, which I already learned before, but I want to get college credit. So if I go through these videos, they will pay for this test that's normally $120,
Jeez.
and they'll pay for it. And if I pass the test, I get college credit. If I didn't do this, I would have to take a semester's worth of classes and spend more money. So this will make it free if I do it right. So that's all.
Can I see it?
Yeah,
I just wanna
sure.
watch it with you.
Oh, sure. I can take the things off. I've got the headphones on. You can sit there. Be me. It's really boring.
Ooh,
It's so boring. I mean,
this looks cool, like the
oh yeah, it's the
OBS.
OBS.
How
Yeah,
do you install OBS?
you just install it. Uh,
Like
what's
what website do you
oh,
like install?
you just go to, I don't know where it is. I just looked up OBS, but it's a pain. Setting it up is weird. Like here I have the display, which is this display, and it records the whole display. And then I have desktop audio, which is the microphone. But see, what I'm doing, it's weird, is this video isn't from OBS. This is from another thing I'm using. So
Why do you have
I
closed
have,
captions?
yeah, I have that from, it's called WebEx, but it's like Zoom. You've heard of Zoom, you've used Zoom, right?
Oh, I know what
Yeah.
WebEx is.
It's WebEx. It's like Zoom, but I have a WebEx running, which gives me the closed captions, and I'm recording the whole video for YouTube and streaming it.
That's cool.
So yeah, but that's the setup for that.
1140.
So there's the audio recording from desktop audio. There's special effects you can do too. Let's see, right click on display and go to filters. And if you do add, there's all kinds of filters you've got. You got, I don't know what half of these are, but you got like backgrounds and stuff. Oh, wait a minute. I know where you can do backgrounds. Do it on the WebEx. Right click on the web. Let's see if you can get options there. No, I guess not. Maybe under video? Where it's a stop video, the little arrow. Move the closed caption out of the way. Do we get video settings? There they are. There should be filters and stuff. Show with others. No, that version doesn't have filters. Never mind.
Speaker and microphone.
Yeah, I thought it had filters. I might be thinking of Zoom.
That's cool. Noise removal.
Yeah, do I have it turned on? Yeah, I think I have it turned on. Oh, no, I don't. But yeah, noise removal works.
Why does it say your name right here?
Oh, because I'm logged in. That's my name.
It says it every single time, like when we end something.
Oh, yeah. You're me now. It doesn't really know my voice.
Who is this? Like,
This is a
what
video, a course on a thing called Modern States. You click on it, yeah. It's like, there's a philanthropist, a guy that makes he's the guy that's like a billionaire. He said, I want more people to take college courses, and he found a way to help them pay for it. So that's what I'm doing.
Cool.
So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
It says you could like adjust the brightness and the saturation on here.
Yeah, that one's a brightness and saturation. See what else, as other filters you got. Is it down there? Oops, no, we don't need to change that. It was here. Image, oh, mask and blend maybe, I don't know. You can click it, yeah, click OK. See what options you get. Alpha channel. Oh yeah, alpha. Change the alpha to like black or something.
Where? Like this?
Yeah, select color, make it like something dark. Make it like basic. It should make the back disappear, I think.
Okay.
And then if you hit OK down.
Well, now I'm gonna move the captions down.
Oh yeah, move the captions.
Where?
Oh wait, part of the screen's over here. You probably have to double click on it to make it fit on the little screen.
This?
Oops, do it again.
Like drag it over. Oh.
That's fine. That works.
is weird looking.
Yeah. Oh, now it's like all over here now. I just wanted you to hit this button. Wait, was it close or was that okay? Yeah, I guess close.
Hmm?
I don't know. Now where
we
do
have
we go?
OBS over here.
I thought that was going to make the... Oh well, it didn't work. I thought it was going to make the black into a green screen. I was
Wait,
wrong.
can I?
Yeah, you can change it.
Whoa, I'm so tiny. How do you check if there's people watching?
Oh, go to YouTube. You could do it through Opera, I guess.
Boing. Thought I could check it through here, but no.
Yeah.
Oh,
Have to be through
Opera, you said?
Opera, yeah. You know, it's recording my.
Oh my god, I can't see anything.
Yeah, usually I use it down here, little O. I don't really use the GX.
What is mouse FX?
Remember?
How did I miss the Opera up here?
Oh yeah, it's right there. Don't need my Facebook. It would be YouTube.
There it
And it
is.
should be. Yeah, there it is. Remember?
How did I miss the Opera? It's actually
Oh yeah, it's right
there.
there. It's actually here, and it's
Don't
probably
need my
nobody
Facebook,
watching
it
right
would
now.
be
YouTube.
One watching, which is
That's
probably
you.
us.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
is
if you rewind a
cool.
little, you'll see you.
There
It
it is.
should be.
Would then be whittled
There's me
down to 10
being
amendments.
bored.
Amendments to the Constitution.
Watching the video.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, I've got a live stream right now of me, so you're there. And I got the closed caption going, and I'm watching a video. So it's me learning on a video, live streaming.
What is it on?
It's American government. I'm taking some college courses, and what do you call this? Is on American. By the way, do we get video settings? There they. Closed captions are magically. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I've got a live stream right now of me, so you're there. And I got the closed caption going, and I'm watching a video. So it's me learning on a video, live streaming.
What is it on?
It's American government. I'm taking some college courses, and what do you call this? Is on American. By the way, do we get video settings? There they. Closed captions are magically. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I've got a live stream right now of me, so you're there. And I got the closed caption going, and I'm watching a video. So it's me learning on a video, live streaming.
What is it on?
It's American government. I'm taking some college courses, and
I think it's getting
what do you call this? Is on American. By the way, do we get video settings? There they. Closed captions are magically. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I've got a live stream right now of me, so you're there. And I got the closed caption going, and I'm watching a video. So it's me learning on a video, live streaming.
What is it on?
It's American government. I'm taking some college courses, and what do you call this? Is on American. By the way, do we get video settings? There they. Closed captions are magically. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I've got a live stream right now of me, so you're there. And I got the closed caption going, and I'm watching a video. So it's me learning on a video, live streaming.
What is it on?
It's American government. I'm taking some college courses, and right now it should be safe.
Yeah, it stopped, but it's funny.
That is funny.
It just kept going. It's about American, and then it just kept saying it. I was gonna play on my my VR, but it was dead because I forgot to plug it in.
Oh, it's not working right?
No, it's not that. It's just I forgot to plug it in like when I was trying to put it on the charger because it was that low battery.
Oh, battery's dead right now?
Yeah, it was
So
like
charge-
that. That's so weird though. How it like, how are you able to like live on YouTube?
Oh, I can do live streams on it.
That's cool. Channel. I want to hear it loop again.
There it is live.
Right there. There's you.
Is that this one? Yeah, it's this. That's us right now.
Channel. I want to hear it loop again.
Yeah, I think it's a 5-second delay. Live.
Right there. There's you.
Okay, longer than 5 seconds.
It's way longer than 5 seconds. Oh. There's me putting on the headphones. So it's like.
Is that this one? Yeah, it's this. That's us right now.
Channel. I want to hear it loop again.
Yeah, I think it's a
There's you,
5-second
wait a
delay.
minute.
Live.
Right there. There's you.
Okay, longer than 5 seconds.
It's way longer than 5 seconds.
That's the second time I did it.
There's me putting on the headphones. So it's like.
Is that this one? Yeah, it's this. That's us right now.
Channel. I want to hear it loop again. It keeps saying I want to hear it loop again. Right there. There's you. Or if I just keep switching my head back and forth.
Okay, longer than 5 seconds.
It's way longer than 5 seconds. It keeps saying you're looping.
That's the second time
Oh.
I did it.
There's me putting on the headphones. So it's like put
Is
up
that this
the
one? Yeah, it's
dip
this. That's
every
us right now.
second. Channel. I want to hear it loop. I'm gonna pause this for a second
Okay.
because it's the fact that it keeps saying. I think it keeps looping. That part it keeps looping.
Yeah.
It keeps saying I
It's
want to
okay.
hear it loop again. It's right there. There's channel. I want to hear it loop. I'm gonna pause this for a second
Okay.
because it's the fact that
right
it keeps saying. I think it keeps looping. That part it keeps looping.
Yeah.
It keeps saying I
It's
want to
okay.
hear it loop again.
My voice
Right there.
changed so
There's-
much.
Channel. I want to hear it loop. I'm gonna pause this for a second
Okay. Yeah, we never
because
hear ourselves the way we think.
Yeah,
it's the
me
fact that
right
it
now.
keeps
My
saying.
voice used
I
to be,
think
like,
it keeps
really, really
looping.
low.
That part it keeps looping.
Yeah.
It keeps saying I
It's
want to
okay.
hear it loop again. Getting annoying.
Okay.
It's just funny. You can have your computer back. I just wanted to see what you were doing out here. 'Cause
It's alright.
when I came out here,
Is your
I saw
report?
that you had the OBS.
Yeah. I'll hope you find a way to be less bored. All right, where was I? Did you close the thing I was working on?
Jury for capital crimes, as well as the right not to testify against oneself. The Sixth Amendment rights to a speedy trial by an impartial jury. The Seventh Amendment guaranteed the right to a jury trial in civil cases. The Eighth Amendment was a right to not face excessive bail, excessive fines, or cruel and unusual punishment. The Ninth and Tenth Amendments reserved to the people or to the states powers not allocated to the federal government. The Ninth Amendment was the rights retained by the people, even if they are not specifically enumerated by the Constitution. And the Tenth Amendment was states' rights to powers not specifically delegated to the federal government. So how can the Constitution be amended? The passage of a constitutional amendment requires ratification by a 2/3 vote of both houses of Congress, approval of 3/4 of the states through the vote of state legislatures or state ratifying conventions. We're now going to carefully go through each of the 10 amendments that comprise the Bill of Rights, beginning with the First, Second, and Third Amendments in this section. Then we'll continue with those directly related to equal protection and due process in the next section. The First Amendment calls for freedom of religion. According to the Establishment Clause, Congress may not have found an official religion, meaning it cannot establish an official religion. And this is different from other countries like Great Britain, for example, where the Queen is the head of the Church of England, the Anglican Church. This has been the case since the time of Henry VIII, when he split with the Catholic Church in the 1500s, because the Pope refused to annul his marriage to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. On the other hand, in what seems like the opposite of Congress not being allowed to endorse any religious activities, there is the Free Exercise Clause, which ensures freedom of individuals to practice a religion. A 1971 Supreme Court case, Lemon versus Kurtzman, provided courts and interest groups with a Lemon test to determine whether their activity was constitutional. It said, when considering funding, the state should ensure that the program in question has no religious purpose. The program in question must not promote or inhibit any religion. In 1984, in the case Lynch versus Donnelly, the court decided that a display of a manger and Santa Claus on public property was constitutional because it was being used to celebrate a national holiday. The use of religious displays on public property has since become a little murkier. But then in 1997, in the case Agostini versus Felton, the court said that the Constitution only requires government neutrality toward religion. The case made the so-called wall of separation between the church and state break down just a little bit. It broke down even further in the 2002 case, Zellman versus Simmons-Harris, that allowed parents to use publicly funded school vouchers to pay tuition at religious schools. Vouchers were intended to spur competition between schools to enhance their quality, but they are very, very controversial. According to the court's rule of strict scrutiny, a law that discriminates against a religious practice must have a compelling government interest and must be as unrestrictive as possible. The First Amendment also calls for freedom of expression, but this has never been absolute. For example, people cannot openly discuss the assassination of a president or other treasonous activities. The free expression clauses have to do with the open discussion of public affairs. The Supreme Court has determined that the clauses prohibit prior restraint like censorship. Something to bear in mind here is that there is a clear and present danger test. In the 1999 Supreme Court case, Civic versus the United States, the court established the clear and present danger test. In this case, the court upheld the conviction of a defendant who had given out of anti-draft literature during wartime. This brings us to the point that the First Amendment protects freedom of speech. The nation's second president, John Adams, signed the Alien and Sedition Acts in 1798. The latter, the Sedition Act, made it a crime to speak out against the government. It was intended to suppress the opposition party, the Jefferson Republicans, from criticizing Adams, who was a Federalist. But that raises the question, is suppressing unpopular speech more dangerous to the American Republic than shutting it down? By the middle of the 20th century, however, the Supreme Court, it upheld the right of symbolic expression, even against the government. In a 1969 case, it upheld the right of students to wear armbands to protest the Vietnam War. Also that year, in 1969, the court allowed for the free expression of radical ideas. These ideas were unpopular, but again, rights of minorities are protected in the Constitution. In the case Brandenburg versus Ohio, again 1969, the court struck down the conviction of a Ku Klux Klansman who had been making threatening statements. The court denied that the threat posed by Brandenburg's words was credible. 2 years later, in a 1971 case, Cohen versus California, allowing someone to wear a shirt with a vulgar anti-war slogan emblazoned on it, the court determined that one man's vulgarity is another man's lyric. In 1997, the court determined that the right of free speech applied to internet content as well. Speaking of words, freedom of the press is also protected under the First Amendment. This right, too, is not absolute. Newspapers can be sued for libel, which is the defamation of a person in writing, and libel is often confused with slander. Slander is an oral statement that is false and intended to damage an individual. But libelous statements against celebrities, as opposed to average people, are less likely to be prosecuted. In the 1974 case, New York Times versus Sullivan, the court decided that false statements made against officials were protected unless the plaintiff could prove malice. And malice is an intent to harm, and it is very difficult to prove, so this put a high burden of proof on the plaintiff. Sometimes the right to a fair trial, protected under the Sixth Amendment, conflicts with the right to freedom of the press under the First Amendment. Occasionally, a judge will issue a gag order to prevent news about a trial from getting out. Moving on to the Second Amendment, which guarantees the right to keep and bear arms. The Second Amendment was intended to ensure that each state could form its own militia. So some say that the National Guard replaced the state militias and therefore the amendment is outdated. Others, proponents of gun rights, say that the amendment is about an armed citizenry. In 2008, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, deems the banning of handguns in Washington, D.C. unconstitutional. But shootings at schools like Columbine have made gun control a campaign issue. Many democracies in Western Europe have much stricter restrictions on the sale of and carrying of firearms. A powerful interest group, the National Rifle Association, or NRA, is against most gun restrictions. Interest groups are discussed in Module 3. The Third Amendment says in full, no soldier shall, in a time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Many people think that the Third Amendment is completely obsolete, as it is unlikely that the government will need to quarter troops, as the British did in Boston, for example, leading in part to the Revolutionary War. The Third Amendment serves as a reminder, however, that Americans have a right to privacy, and that homes will not be violated by the government unless there is a significant reason for the government to do so. Be sure to keep reading and to do the questions in this section and watch the video as many times as you like. In this module, we'll discuss the remainder of the Bill of Rights, 4 through 10, as well as the 14th Amendment. These cemented the right to equal protection and due process into the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment protects individuals from overzealous law enforcement. They must have probable cause to obtain a search warrant to search or seize your private property. The Fourth through Eighth Amendments essentially limited police powers of the states by guaranteeing fair treatment and legal and judicial proceedings. One small exception to that is the Takings Clause of the Fifth Amendment. It says that private property cannot be taken for public use without just compensation. This provision, along with the Due Process Clause's provisions limiting the taking of property, can be viewed as a protection of the obtaining, the use, and the tangible and intangible property for their own benefit. For example, you have the right to trade your knowledge, skills, and labor for money through work or for the use of your property, or trade money or goods for other things of value, such as clothing, housing, education, or food. The greatest recent controversy over economic liberty has been the government's use of the right of eminent domain to take property for redevelopment. And traditionally, the main use of eminent domain was to obtain property for transportation purposes like railroads and highways, which require fairly straight routes to be efficient. But it can often pit low-income people against multinational corporations that have the support of the federal government. And President Eisenhower's Federal Highway Act of 1956 bulldozed entire neighborhoods. It was the first time in American history that people could drive, though, from New York City to San Francisco without hitting a single traffic light. You know the saying about coming from the wrong side of the tracks? With the Federal Highway Act, you could literally find yourself living on the wrong side of the highway. But back to the 4th through 8th Amendments. Some of the most controversial Warren Court decisions, the Warren Court is also discussed in Module 2.2, were those affirming the rights of accused criminals dealing with interpretations of the 4th through 8th Amendments. Just after Eisenhower left office in 1961, in the Supreme Court case Mapp versus Ohio, the court put into place the exclusionary rule, which says that evidence gathered illegally cannot be used in a court of law against a defendant. The ruling was drawn from the 4th Amendment, which protects individuals against unlawful search and seizure. In 1984, the court enunciated the good faith exception principle, stating that if a warrant was given in good faith, even if it was based on faulty evidence, the evidence could still be used in a trial. This idea was not to protect against criminal behavior, but against corrupt policing. In Gideon versus Wainwright, 1963, the Warren Court ruled that a person who could not afford an attorney for his or her own defense had a right to an attorney, also known as counsel, to be provided at the public's expense. The next year, in Escobedo versus Illinois, it voided the murder confessions of a man who had been denied the right to see an attorney. But the most controversial criminal rights case is still the 1966 Miranda versus Arizona case, in which a divided Supreme Court ruled that an individual accused of a crime had the rights to remain silent and to have an attorney present during interrogation. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you can say and do will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand the rights as I have just read them to you? With these rights in mind, do you wish to speak to me? I'm sure you are all very well behaved, but should you be arrested, make sure your Miranda rights are read to you. Further, you cannot be imprisoned without a trial. You are entitled to receive a trial by jury in a criminal case. The protection of a citizen from imprisonment without a trial is called due process, one of your rights outlined in the 5th Amendment of the Constitution. The 5th Amendment also protects individuals against double jeopardy, a process that subjects a suspect to prosecution twice for the same criminal act. No one who has been acquitted, which means found not guilty of the act, of a crime like that can be prosecuted again for that crime. But stay out of trouble and study hard. If you do get into trouble again, the 6th Amendment outlines your rights in the criminal trial, including the right to witnesses, and the 7th Amendment outlines your rights in a civil trial, such as disagreements between an individual and a business. And the 8th Amendment promises that excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. While the 4th through 8th provided what amounted to equal protection of the laws for all Americans, this was not explicitly guaranteed until the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. It stated that no state could deny citizens of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, nor deny any citizens in its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. Court cases that affirm these rights, such as Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, are discussed in Module 2.2, the development of civil rights and civil liberties. And you see that due process is mentioned in both the 5th and 14th Amendments. But to finish up with the Bill of Rights, the 9th and 10th Amendments are discussed thoroughly in Module 5.1 on federalism. But very briefly, the 9th Amendment states, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Today, we take for granted certain rights that are not enumerated in the Constitution, such as the right to seek opportunities for employment, opportunities for education, the right to have children, the right to raise a family. But in China, for example, the state had a one-child policy in place between 1979 and 2015. At the time of this filming, the Chinese government is considering a baby bonus to encourage couples to have a second child, a reversal of the earlier policy. The 10th Amendment states that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. This amendment does not limit the power of the federal government in any meaningful way. It simply restates what is made obvious elsewhere in the Constitution. The federal government has both enumerated and implied powers, but where the federal government does not or chooses not to exercise powers, the state may do so. Be sure to continue reading in your textbook and look over this video and continue answering the questions provided. The Federalist Papers, written under the pen name Publius, warns about the development of factions, which are political parties and interest groups. In the third module, you'll learn everything you need to know about both, as well as the intricacies of elections. First, we'll talk about political parties, which are large coalitions. They represent a significant portion of American citizens. We'll break up that unit into political parties, historical development, functions, and effects, political parties' organization and mobilization, dissension within the parties, and third parties. Then we'll discuss interest groups. We'll define and go over some different types of interest groups or lobbyists. We'll understand the difference between in-house lobbyists, contract lobbyists, and grassroots lobbyists. And then we'll explain the complex system of laws governing lobbyists. Finally, in the third section, we'll talk about elections, the electoral system, and include the process that candidates need to go through to be elected to office at the federal level, and the many different types of ballots that voters can cast, depending on the technology their districts use. You may think voting should be done via the internet, especially because you are watching this course online now. But this is not the case yet, and by the end of Module 3, you'll know why. Let's get started. In this section, we'll cover political parties' historical development, function, and effects. We'll talk about the first, second, and third party system, and we'll define what critical election is, for example. We'll trace the organization and mobilization of political parties, and then we'll get into the complicated topic of campaign finance law. We'll cover the wide variety of issue areas the two parties cover, and we'll talk briefly about the differences between the platforms of the two major parties, and then delve into the differences within the parties themselves. At the end of this unit, we'll go over the notable third parties and third party candidates throughout American history, and when third parties are most effective. All right, are you ready? Let's get started. The Federalist Papers, discussed in Module 5.6.5, specifically James Madison's Federalist Number 10, warned against factions, which are political parties or interest groups, and we'll be discussing both of these now in Module 3. Political parties try to gain control of government by winning elections. The United States' political processes, the plurality rules for determining election outcomes, meaning that the winner is the candidate that gets more votes than any other candidate, support a two-party electoral system. Now let's discuss this historical development of the two-party system. Although George Washington, the nation's first president, did not officially declare allegiance to a political party, he seemed to side with Alexander Hamilton, the nation's first Secretary of the Treasury. And this made Thomas Jefferson, America's first Secretary of State, decide to retire from government, but only temporarily. He came out of retirement to become the nation's third president. Hamilton was a Federalist, as discussed in Module 5.6.5, and followers of Jefferson became known as Democratic Republicans, later shortened to Republicans. This was the first two-party system. Because Federalists were Anglophiles, meaning lovers of all things British, and did not support the War of 1812, sometimes called the Second War for Independence because Americans again were fighting the British, the Americans' victory eliminated the Federalists as a national political force. I have a fun fact for you. The last battle of the war, the Battle of New Orleans, was fought 3 weeks after the peace treaty was signed, the Treaty of Ghent, and it made future President Major General Andrew Jackson nationally famous. So news traveled really slowly back then. With political rivals removed, the Federalists and the Republicans all supported federal support for internal improvements. As Republicans adopted positions they had once been against, an era of good feelings dawned. It describes both of James Monroe's presidential administrations as he wanted to heal America's political divisions and avoid major controversies. But when the Republicans put up 5 different candidates for the presidential election of 1824, it was clear that they were not one homogeneous party. Westward expansion had split Jefferson's old party. Generally, supporters of states' rights joined the Democrats, and advocates of national support for economic development became known as the Whigs. This was the second party system. In 1824, Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams were both members of Jefferson's Republican Party, but by 1834, Jackson was a Democrat and Adams a Whig. In 1852, Democrat Franklin Pierce was the last presidential candidate to become president under the second party system. Within 4 years of Pierce's election, the Whig Party would decline, replaced by 2 new ones, the American Know-Nothing Party and the Republican Party. The Republicans, as you can imagine, took their name from Jefferson's Democratic Republican Party. The American Know-Nothing Party quickly declined as a national force in politics, certainly by the 1856 election of James Buchanan. The Democrats and Republicans first competed against one another in the election of 1856. The next election, 1860, is sometimes called a critical election because it is associated with a major realignment of the parties. And this major realignment persisted throughout subsequent elections, leading to political or electoral realignment. Republican Abraham Lincoln won that election, but because he did not appear on the ballot in 10 southern states, it cannot be said that he had a mandate. A mandate is a popular majority of the vote to govern. It's also difficult for a president to get his agenda accomplished if the opposing party controls both houses of Congress. This is known as divided government. The Republican Party won each presidential election from 1860 through 1884. We are still in the midst of the third two-party system, the Democrats versus the Republicans. The two-party system came into being because the structure of U.S. elections, with one seat tied to a geographic district, tends to lead to dominance by 2 major political parties. Even when there are other options on the ballot, most voters understand that the minor parties have no real chance of winning, even a single office. Hence, they vote for candidates of the 2 major parties in order to support a potential winner. The US democracy favors a two-party system because the third party does not really have a serious chance of winning the election. Voters in the US, they tend to be of centrist opinion, and both the Republican and Democratic parties comprise so many different issues and interest groups that both tend to legislate mostly from the political center. The Democrats lean a little to the left, and Republicans a little to the right. Campaign finance laws are written by the two major parties, and they are, unsurprisingly, designed to favor the two major parties. To receive funding from the federal government, the party must receive at least 5% of the vote annually and appear on a minimum of 10 state ballots. This means that the first year the party must fund itself. Not an easy thing to do since the system favors the two major parties. Campaign finance laws are discussed further in Module 3.1.2. For now, review this module closely, read your textbook. To win elections and therefore gain political power, political parties need to be well organized at the federal, state, and local levels, as well as well funded to fund campaigns. As mentioned in Module 3.1.1, to receive funding, the party must get at least 5% of the vote annually and appear on a minimum of 10 state ballots. Why do candidates need so much money, especially because buying votes isn't legal? You might be asking yourself. Campaigns are expensive. I've run a congressman's campaign, and I can tell you that money is needed for full-time political advisors, like I was, although I worked with a lot of volunteers who were really critical to help drop campaign literature door to door, deliver yard signs, make phone calls, send mass emails. Bumper stickers, yard signs, campaign buttons, and shirts need to be developed. The advertisements on the internet, radio, TV, and print can get expensive, as well as travel expenses, polling services, and office space. And these are just a few examples of the money needed. I've also managed a political action committee, or PAC. The federal government wanted to create more transparency and curtail the huge amounts of money entering elections, so it passed a number of bills, which led to the formation of PACs in the 1970s. From that point forward, their number steadily grew. As an early example of campaign finance legislation, came after Theodore Roosevelt's campaign raised an unprecedented amount of money. So in 1907, Congress passed the Tillman Act, which prohibited corporations from contributing money to candidates running in federal elections. The most important act was passed in 1971, the Federal Elections Campaign Act, FICA. It outlined how candidates would report all contributions and expenditures related to their campaigns. An amendment to the Act in 1974, 3 years later, had created the Federal Election Commission, the FEC. And that is an independent regulatory agency, and it's set up to oversee campaign financing, ensuring that candidates stay within the legal limits. FICA also created rules governing the way organizations and companies could contribute to federal campaigns, which allow for the creation of PACs. PACs are formed by interest groups, such as unions or businesses that want to contribute to campaigns. They pool funds and they give money to the candidates. So when we speak of campaign contributions, we must first distinguish between hard money and soft money. Hard money is given directly to candidates, whereas soft money is given to party committees to be used more generally. The relationship between money and politics is very complicated. A recent attempt to control money's influence on political campaigns or federal offices came in the form of a law passed in 2002. This law was called the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, the BCRA, but better known simply as McCain-Feingold, after the last names of the original sponsors of the act. This law was fiercely challenged in court, and though it was upheld in the Supreme Court in 2003, and it went into effect the following year. Some had challenged BCRA because they believed its limitations on gifts to PACs amounted to an abridgment of free speech as guaranteed in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. First Amendment rights are discussed thoroughly in Module 2. McCain-Feingold prohibited political parties' committees from raising or spending funds beyond federal limits, whether the elections in question were at the national, state, or local levels. Also, as a result of what was called Stand By Your Ad, in McCain-Feingold, politicians are required to tell viewers of political messages that they approve this message. Some unforeseen consequences came out of McCain-Feingold. The importance of 527 committees grew. 527 committees got their name from that part of the Internal Revenue Code. As long as these 527 committees are not affiliated with a political party and do not specifically endorse a candidate, their advertisements are not taxed. For that reason, 527 committees will run advertisements about specific issues rather than attacking a candidate directly. An effort to control presidential campaign costs came in the form of public financing. If a candidate raises more than $5,000 in donations of less than $250 in 20 different states, then the candidate qualifies for public funding for his or her campaign. However, there is a limit on how much public funding a candidate can receive, so candidates often decline public financing, so as not to limit how much money can be raised and spent on the campaign. In the 2000 presidential election, Republican George W. Bush declined public financing, for example, and in 2004, Democrat John Kerry did the same. In 2010, the Supreme Court's ruling on Citizen United versus the Federal Election Commission led to the removal of spending limits on corporations. Justices in the majority argued that the BCRA violated a corporation's free speech rights. The court ruling also allowed corporations to place unlimited money into super PACs, or independent expenditure-only committees. These organizations cannot contribute directly to a candidate, nor can they strategize with the candidate's campaign. They can, however, raise and spend as much money as they please to support or attack a candidate, including running advertisements and hosting events. The Citizens United court ruling continues to remain controversial today. Continue to review this video and do your readings in the textbook and answer all your questions. Because the parties try to garner the votes of such a geographically and culturally diverse nation, and the political interests represented are also diverse, it can be hard to define exactly what the two parties stand for. Generally, the Republican Party is more to the right or conservative, and the Democratic Party leans left or furthers more liberal viewpoints. The Republicans tend to oppose marriage rights for homosexuals and are generally pro-life, which means anti-abortion. However, the log cabin Republicans favor marriage rights for homosexuals, and the Republicans for choice are, as their name implies, not against abortion. Similarly, the Democrats tend to favor spending on social programs and are more likely to support universal health care, as we have seen with the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare. But the Blue Dog Democrats advocate for fiscal restraint, like conservatives. Conservatives support policies such as lowering barriers to trade, for example. In the late 20th century, with the Vietnam War and Watergate scandals, we have seen a de-alignment where more and more citizens become disenchanted with or disillusioned by government promises, and they choose not to declare themselves aligned with either of the two major parties, at least not publicly. Increasingly, the 21st century, there has been a call for bipartisanship, which means a call for both parties to reach across the aisle or across party lines to cooperate, to get work done, and to stop gridlock. A growing number of people have decided to become independents, and many of these are considered swing voters, or those that, in enough numbers, can swing an election away from one candidate and in favor of another. Many historians attribute Democrat presidential candidates Al Gore's loss in the year 2000. He lost by 4 electoral college votes only to George W. Bush, due to the presence of a third-party candidate, Ralph Nader. He represented the Green Party. In this case, because many believed he caused that loss, he can be referred to as a spoiler. In 2004, Ralph Nader ran again, this time as an independent. People registered as independents are less likely to vote in elections compared to Republicans and Democrats. But the reason that dissension within the parties does not lead to the formation of multiple parties is because, as discussed in the previous module, Module 3.1.1, the U.S. favors a two-party system. What would encourage the formation of more parties? Well, many other Western democracies, such as Canada, have a multi-party system, where major candidates are required to get a plurality of the votes. Again, plurality means more votes than any other candidate. Many democracies have chosen to have voters pick their preferred party and allow the party to select the individuals who serve in government. The argument for this method is that it is ultimately the party and not the individual who will influence policy, and therefore personal leadership styles play less of a role in the overall formation of the policies. Under this model of proportional representation, legislative seats are allocated to competing parties based on the total share of votes they receive in the election. As a result, any given election can have multiple winners, and voters who might prefer a smaller party over a major one have a chance to be represented in government. The U.S. has seen many third parties or minor parties develop, but they are usually short-lived. Third parties form because their leaders and supporters feel that the major parties are not addressing their concerns. But third parties are effective when they dramatize these issues and these positions that are being ignored by the major parties. The major third parties and the role of these parties is discussed in the next module, Module 3.1.4. So continue viewing this module and reading your textbook and answer the questions thoroughly. Short-lived. Third parties form because their leaders and supporters feel that the major parties are not addressing their concerns. But third parties are effective when they dramatize these issues and these positions that are being ignored by the major parties. The major third parties and the role of these parties is discussed in the next module, Module 3.1.4. So continue viewing this module and reading your textbook and answer the questions thoroughly. Short-lived. Third parties form because their leaders and supporters feel that the major parties are not addressing their concerns. Third parties are effective when they dramatize these issues. Some types of third parties are economic protest parties, issue parties. There are some that are ideological, and there are also factional parties. Let's start with the economic protest parties. Economic protest parties galvanize around monetary issues like the coinage of silver, such as the Greenback Labor Party in 1880 and 1884. They wanted the federal government to produce more greenbacks or paper money. In 1892, James Weaver, who ran as the Greenback Labor Party candidate in 1880, he ran as the candidate for the People's or Populist Party. The most well-known Populist Party candidate was William Jennings Bryan, and actually he ran as a Democrat twice before he became the Populist Party's nominee. His main issue was to increase the coinage of silver. The Socialist Party was formed in 1901 and disbanded in 1972. There was Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, who vied for the Democratic presidential nomination against Hillary Clinton in the presidential election of 2016. He calls himself a socialist. And socialists emphasize the government-directed equalization of wealth and government control of industry, but many associate socialism with communism. Now, communists are for the abolition of private property, and the fact that the former Soviet Union, the US's foil during the Cold War, was a communist nation ensured that it was not going to be a popular idea here in the United States. The most famous member of the Socialist Party was Eugene V. Debs. He ran for president 4 times, though he failed to win any electoral college votes. Another ideological party example includes the Libertarian Party, which believes in less government involvement in the day-to-day lives of individuals. Issue parties tend to focus on one topic, and their success is usually short-lived. In 1912, Republicans refused to give the nomination to former President Theodore Roosevelt, so he and his supporters formed the Bull Moose Party. This is an example of a splinter party because it splintered the Republican vote, handing the presidency to the Democrat Woodrow Wilson. The weakening of political parties is most often associated with progressive-era reforms. Prohibition, the 18th Amendment ratified in 1919 and repealed by the 21st Amendment in 1933, is one such example of a progressive-era reform, and the Prohibition Party didn't last very long. Factional parties are parties that tend to break away from other parties and tend to center on one individual. Other parties tend to center on an individual who has left a major party. In 1948, Strom Thurmond opposed Harry Truman's nomination for the Democratic Party and formed the States' Rights Party, known as the Dixiecrats. They were for states' rights and for the segregation of the races. They won 4 states in the South, but Truman still won the presidency. Even in the two-party system, it is difficult to beat the incumbent. The incumbent is the one who holds office. This is true of both Congress and the president. In fact, in the past 30 years, the single most important variable in determining the outcome of an election for a major member of the House of Representatives has been incumbency. Is the one who holds office. This is true of both Congress and the president. In fact, in the past 30 years, the single most important variable in determining the outcome of an election for a major member of the House of Representatives has been incumbency. In 1992, Ross Perot was a relatively successful third-party candidate for president. He ran on an anti-incumbency platform promising to pay down the federal debt. He garnered 19 million votes, but he did not win the election. No third-party candidate has ever won a presidential election. But to return to the point that it is difficult to beat the incumbent, why is that? First, incumbents are well known. They have name recognition and voting records. The media is more likely to interview them because they have advertised their name over several elections and have voted on legislation affecting the state or district. Incumbents also have won election before, which increases the odds that political action committees and interest groups will give them money. Most interest groups will not give money to a candidate destined to lose. Incumbents also have franking privileges. This is essentially stamps that allow them a limited amount of free mail to communicate with the voters in their district to update these voters on key issues. These mailings may not be sent in the months up to an election, but they do give congressmen additional ways to reach their voters and develop a long-term relationship. The incumbent does not have to build new organizations from the ground up. Incumbents will have more money in their war chest than most challengers, and they often begin raising this money as soon as they take office. Another incumbent advantage is gerrymandering, the drawing of district lines to try to guarantee a desired electoral outcome. Every 10 years, following the U.S. Census, the number of House of Representatives members allotted to each state is determined based on a state's population. If a state gains or loses seats in the House, the state must redraw districts to ensure each district has an equal number of citizens. If the district is drawn to ensure that it includes a majority of Democratic then candidates from those parties will have an advantage. This practice was declared unlawful by the Supreme Court in 1986, but did not officially define the word gerrymandering. In 2004, the Supreme Court declined to get involved in a gerrymandering case. Gerrymandering helps local legislative candidates and members of the House of Representatives who win re-election over 90% of the time. After the 2010 census, gerrymandering took place based on sophisticated computer programs. These computer programs knew even what publications people in individual homes were reading and what they were buying on the internet, and matched that information up with likely party affiliation. So now we have this crazy district map that doesn't follow any logical geographic boundaries or landmarks, really, one that cuts streets into pieces, requiring neighbors to vote in different districts. Be sure to read thoroughly your textbook and look over this video and do all the questions. That doesn't follow any logical geographic boundaries or landmarks, really, one that cuts streets into pieces, requiring neighbors to vote. individual homes were reading and what they were buying on the internet. After the 2010 census, gerrymandering took place based on sophisticated computer programs. These computer programs knew even what publications people in individual homes were reading and what they were buying on the internet, and matched that information up with likely party affiliation. So now we have this crazy district map that doesn't follow any logical geographic boundaries or landmarks, really, one that cuts streets into pieces, requiring neighbors to vote in different districts. In this section, 3.2, we'll talk about the formation and influence of interest groups in American politics. Despite the warnings of the framers of the Constitution, there are now some 200,000 plus interest groups. We'll be defining and differentiating between interest groups. We'll talk about how, unlike political parties, many of these groups are not trying to get a specific candidate elected. Instead, we'll see how some interest groups function as more general membership organizations that are monitoring the issues of great import to their members, and some interest groups are very specific issue groups. We'll also be discussing the complex system of laws governing lobbyists, because there are vast sums of money in American politics. Although the Supreme Court is covered thoroughly in Module 2, we'll be discussing some recent challenges to these laws here as well.
Um, Hola. Was there a cat behind you?
I'm worried I didn't hit the door enough for it to shut.
Oh yes, yes, that can be annoying. Oh yeah, you were talking about wait.